Welcome to the Product Design Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Coelen, founder of UX Cabin, where we create world-class web and mobile apps. I'm excited to bring you a behind-the-scenes look into the lives of some of the most interesting and talented people in product design. We'll get strategic advice on how they got to where they are today and things they wish they would have known earlier in their career. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of the Product Design Podcast. Today we have Danielle Thompson with us. She is the founder of Design Match. Danielle, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us.
Of course. I'm super happy to be here and just really excited about it.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you live, what you do, what some of your hobbies are, and then we'll get into the meat of the podcast.
For sure. Where I live, that's always the hardest question. Specifically today, I am in Mexico, Playa del Carmen. But for the last 7 years, I've been living quite around the world with my base in Bali, Indonesia, but living everywhere from Singapore to Australia, Argentina, and just traveling around. Things I love to do. I really love being out in nature. I think the places that I've been have been just some of the most stunning places in the world, being in the ocean and lakes and rivers, and especially working in technology. I think it's so important to get off the computer sometimes. So that's some of the things that I really like to do. And recently, just starting to learn how to play piano. So that's a fun one.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about your origin story, how you got in the field of product design and UX, and give us a little insight into that journey.
Of course. Yeah. So design at the time when I was starting in the world, I didn't know, or in the creative world, I didn't know so much about product design. This is back when we still used Photoshop and Dreamweaver to make websites. So a really different landscape for designers. And I started as a fine artist in high school, learning, painting, drawing, and creating things. I moved from fine art into photography and then naturally into design. So I learned a little bit about illustration, how to make my photos look really cool, learned a bit about Photoshop. I actually learned Photoshop to edit my first selfie, on my little camera. And from there, I was like, wow, this is such a cool way to express myself, because before I needed paint, I needed canvas, I needed a room. And now I could just be online and just create these amazing things. And so it was a really natural progression into design. I never thought, okay, I'm going to be a designer today, but I just love creating things. And I just got better and better at creating digital products. And I think when I really started getting into design as a career I was on the site called Elance, and this is before Upwork. So it was bought by Upwork, and there was another one called Odesk, and they all merged to create Upwork. And I went on there and I was like, oh my gosh, I could get paid for knowing Photoshop. This is awesome. And I found this job where this guy wanted me to edit his online dating profile photos. So he wanted to be a little bit more tan, his teeth a little whiter. And that was the first time I got paid for any kind of Photoshop design, digital artwork. That was my entry point into this world.
Very cool. So did you just kind of grow up in a creative environment where maybe your parents pushed you towards fine arts, or how did you kind of get that start and knack for that side of things?
Yeah, great question. I think my parents have just been really open people. They used to be kind of artists in their own right. I kind of found their art later in my life. We were moving houses. I was like, Mom, there's a giant oil painting of you in the storage room. What? Well, who did this? She's like, oh, me. And I was like, what? You are secretly so talented. Oh my gosh. But my parents were just very open in terms of however I expressed. And I was, I think, as a young person, always looking for ways to communicate. I think I'm a designer by nature. I'm always looking how to problem solve, communicate things, and naturally fell into it between the other arts and having a computer, being like, okay, I could just make something. My first website was actually when I was in 7th grade, and I created a website to show things that were going on in class. So I created my own bulletin website with a little basic HTML. And so I always loved communicating, and I always loved making it easier for people to get whatever they're looking for in that communications. So that's how I kind of naturally made my way. But my parents have been amazing in terms of support, and my family has been amazing in terms of support.
Very cool. Yeah, it's always interesting to see how people kind of get into design, and some people, their parents have a very specific path that they want them to take, whether, go into, education or, medical or become a lawyer, and other people's parents who are kind of like, open and free to whatever you want to do. But I no doubt that plays a big role in, our journey. One thing I always say is like, I feel like, and this sounds really bad, but I feel like my parents had like a healthy amount of like almost low expectations for me. So like, that sounds negative, right? But it's really like, allowing me to have flexibility in like what I like to do and what I was good at. So I didn't have these crazy high expectations of I had to get all A's, or I had to be the best in my class, or I had to be in this certain career field. It was like, hey, if you're good at that and you like doing that, like, that's great. I'm happy for you. And it was kind of freeing. Like, I didn't feel like I had this pressure. Like, I had to spend all my time trying to get like an A in science if I wasn't like particularly good at it. It was just like, Seth kind of has his strengths and his weaknesses, and, we want to just help encourage him along those lines.
Definitely. And yeah, my family is very similar. I think it's quite a privilege to grow up in a home like that. And something that's curious to me right now is with the rise of kind of boot camp. So there's like UX, UI, product boot camps, and you're finding more people who are going into design really deliberately, because I guess like maybe 10 years ago, it wasn't a clear career path.
Right.
There was design, but especially digital design, it wasn't a clear career path. So I felt like the people who were coming into it were kind of creatives finding digital mediums for their art and ways to express themselves, or communications people finding that they could work in this space. But now with the rise of boot camps, I'm curious, and I don't have a strong opinion, but like, how interdisciplinary is the thinking when it comes to design when you are taught design? Because design is the translation of everything. It's all the experiences you have as a person, your opinions, your thoughts, your lived experiences with frameworks and needs, and then that translates into something. But what happens when you just go in and you say, okay, this is a good career. There's some great pay here. Tech is on the rise, and let me take this boot camp, learn the skills, how to use Figma, and then produce. So I've just been really curious, like, what the next generation of design is looking like, as the reasons and the path to it is really changing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one thing with like boot camps and, even just like traditional college learning in general is like they kind of provide you the linear happy path of like how projects should go and what process you should do. And that's not really real life. I think it's good to get like a survey like of this is kind of the general way and how things could or should go. But I think real life is a bit different as to when you can use what process, when you have the luxury of doing certain exercises or things or working with clients. So I think there's never really going to be a way to replace, actual small business, work in producing digital, experiences.
Definitely. And I think within that, the part that I'm most curious about, because I agree, like, real life experience is the best teacher, is really around mindfulness. Like, what is your vision for a better world, and how are you putting that into your designs? Which is usually designers want to improve things, help people create better experiences. But I remember, so when I was in school, we had a class that I can't remember the real name, but our teacher said it was called Mindfulness 101. And I was like, what kind of school am I at right now? Because I signed up for a design class. But it was how, when we solve a problem, we create others and who we're affecting. And I just feel like this element around the mindfulness of design, and as a creator who's working with some amazing, powerful companies, what you're putting out into the world, what you're voting for into the world. And I think that, for me, I think my only opinion on boot camps, I think that's the part that's missing. The ethical implications of what you're making, the emotional implications of what you're making, and understanding, having a framework for understanding your biases, understanding just like where you stand. Because sometimes I think, especially with UI kits and how there's styles that are very prominent, it's so easy to not feel like you don't have to think about those things. It's like, okay, I need a menu, I could use a hamburger, and like, that's it, But I think like with design becoming such a popular career, my only concern is that the design thinking is not as important as design execution and theme of education and how things are being weighed.
Yeah. Yeah. Like everything is, you could almost have like this just templated approach to building products, and everything kind of looks and feels the same. And it's just driven by business and data and no like soul or character within the products. Kind of, is that kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah. And just again, the mindfulness of what we're building, especially like when you come to social media, like how do we get people's attention? What are the methodologies we use? How do we communicate when it comes to inclusion? How do we make sure that people feel heard, understood, part of whatever we're building? So there's all these kind of like degrees in which we can look at things. And then that cookie cutter approach often doesn't really consider many of those things. And so I think they'll come with, like you're saying, lived experience. Like you'll start seeing especially as you work for more powerful companies and your work gets used and you see the data back, you can hopefully relate that to an actual person's lived experience. But I would love in the space of design for a little bit more mindfulness to be part of the everyday curriculum that's coming out of some of the boot camps.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting angle. I appreciate that point of view. Yeah. So, thinking about kind of your origin and how you got started, what kind of propelled you into your first actual like career in design?
Yeah. So design, again, was always just something that I was like, whoa, people will pay me to do this. This is great. Like, I love it. And I started as a freelancer right away. So just kind of finding work online and producing things. And I guess I went from freelancing to my first startup. So I don't know if I've ever had an actual design job, actually, like been an employee with like, I don't know. Actually, I was only an employee once for Wonderland theme park. Just like that was the only time in my life I've been an employee. So I went from freelancing and then I started a company called Intern. And the idea was people could get paid internships in design specifically. And why I started that is because in my class, I was making more money than a lot of my classmates. And I was one of the worst in the class. So when they did this, I was always the last big designer. But I knew how to sell and market myself. I knew how to communicate. And I also didn't believe that I needed to wait to get a degree to be able to give value. And what I noticed also is the people who were working in their field had done internships and they got that confidence from the internships. But most of those people were of certain economic backgrounds who could afford to do unpaid internships. But some of my friends who were working in school couldn't afford to do that. They didn't have the luxury. So I was like, okay, so my friends who are from, maybe less prosperous economic backgrounds have to wait, maybe work at like a pet store or something like that, which is fine, but not what they want to do for the next 4 years till they get the degree and then get an entry level job. But my friends who are from a stronger economic background are getting these unpaid internships already, ins with the top companies. And by the time they graduate, they're going to be at a mid-level position. And I was like, that's not particularly fair. So I created a company called Intern. I was like 17, 18. And I raised some funds for it and everything. But a 17, 18-year-old should not be running a company. I had no idea what to do. Running a company is definitely like making web pages and then like thinking about the idea, like nothing with marketing. It's just like worrying about the icons I was using in my business plan. This was like where my mindset was at. And so that was the first like entry point into like design as business. It was terrifying, stressful, and definitely failed, but it was like an amazing experience.
That's so cool. I think a few things to touch on is like, I think people, whether you're in a boot camp, whether you're not in a boot camp, whether you're trying to find a job, I think you should always be freelancing because, you think about freelancing as like, I want to do this skill. I want to do this specific, hard skill. But in order to like do freelance, you have to be really good at a lot of other things, or it helps develop your skills for a lot of things. So like you said, like sales, marketing, how to pitch, how to persuade, how to talk with someone, and how to manage a project, how to deliver files, or how to present your work. And a lot of those things you're kind of insulated from in a company. And those skill sets that you use for freelancing or getting work freelancing are so transferable to every aspect of life that I think I just can't say enough good things about freelancing. You don't need permission from anyone to do it, right? Like if you can get the work, awesome. You don't have to be amazing. You don't have to be the best designer, because there's all sorts of different people looking for all sorts of different levels and prices for freelance work.
Exactly. 100% agree. And also, alongside that, some people are nervous to freelance because they think it will look bad on their resume. You have a gap and then it says freelancing. But seriously, it makes you so much more employable. Like the amount of offers that even I personally received when I was, in the workforce, after I started freelancing and gained a portfolio of such diverse work, you're showing that hiring managers, you're showing these companies that you are a multifaceted person. And so just for anyone who's listening who might be nervous about freelancing, thinking, oh, it's going to look worse or it's going to look bad, in my experience, I've actually found it looks better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. Because it's like, if I'm hiring a designer and I see that they freelanced for like a significant portion of time or throughout their career, it's like, oh, well, I know that you are really good at talking with people to figure out requirements, to present work, all the things I previously mentioned. So it's like, yeah, I see it as a very positive thing.
Yeah, completely.
And then, yeah, on your internship point, I think, yeah, that's really, one of the reasons why we made our internship at UX Cabin paid, is because when you offer to pay, it's like you get access to so many other people who are, fantastically skilled individuals, but they just might not have the opportunity or be in a point in their life where they could, do something unpaid. And you cut yourself off from so many people that you might have gotten opportunity. And like, I don't know, let's be honest, a lot of these companies probably could pay for interns. So if UX Cabin can do it as a small little agency, probably most people can do it. So for anyone listening, it's at a big company, please pay your interns.
Yes, please. I completely agree. I think also it sets in your mind this confidence cycle when you see a reward for what you're doing, even if it's a stipend, just like feeling like, hey, I did something and it was of value. I exchanged it on the market and received that value. I think psychologically, it's really healthy to have that relationship, especially with early work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like, if push comes to shove, it's like, well, I'm not getting paid for this, so I'm not going to put it as a priority or whatever. It's like, that's a fair thought. Like, if they're not valuing your work, why would you value the output? And yeah, so I think that's a very natural, like, economic consequence of not paying employees. It's like, you're not going to take it seriously. But yeah, looking back on your career, is there anything that you like look back and you say, man, I wish I would have done something differently at this point, or anything that you look back and said, like, I was super glad I did this because it really helped me out long term?
Yeah, I think, looking back, you can always see, I think it's like so cringy sometimes looking at like how I navigated business, but I think it's all part of the journey. There's a part of me who wants to say, I want to go back and like have, executed this differently. But then the classic thing is that I wouldn't be where I am now. And I think it's been the journey that's been so fun. So the last 8 years or so, I've spent traveling the world, meeting amazing people, working with fantastic companies, starting multiple companies and initiatives. And although I could have a lot more money right now, for example, I could have done things even better with some of my businesses, I really think they brought me to who I am today. And I think one thing that I really want to communicate, something that I think is so important that maybe isn't talked about super often, is as you're on this journey, whether it's a freelance journey or a startup journey, not betting too much on the future, being present also, like having ambition, having goals, having things that you want to achieve, which is super amazing, but also not sacrificing the present for some hypothetical future that will be. I think it's so easy to keep buying into, okay, in this many months, I'll start prioritizing my health, or I'll do something fun, or when I have free time, I'll be able to, be with my partner more, whatever the thing is that you're holding off on because of some kind of work obligation that you put on yourself. In my personal opinion, I don't think it's worth it ever. I think that one thing I'm so grateful I did is that I enjoyed every step of it. And sometimes it was stressful. Sometimes it was, very easy, but making sure that no matter what was going on, that I was having fun, that I was spending time with people I love, making time to see my family, and also time for self-development and self-work.
That's really good. I think looking back on my career, I think kind of along those lines, it's like, and again, this takes a certain level of, confidence and familiarity with what you're doing and where you're at. But I think betting on yourself has always paid off for me, right? So it's like, if I was ever in a point in my career or whatever, where I was like, I feel like I could actually do this better. It's like, okay, well, take a bet on yourself and try that. Try doing, this thing that's going on at work. If you think you could do it better, try finding a client that you can, execute better on, or you can do client management better, or you can start your own business, or whatever the case may be. I think people are by nature very loss averse, and they're very conscious of if this doesn't work out, what will happen, rather than looking at the upside of well, what if you do switch careers and it's amazing? Or what if you do, go full-time freelance and it's amazing, versus being stuck in your boring job or whatever. So I think encouragement for anyone out there, if, you are struggling kind of with not having enough confidence, or just feeling like you need someone to give you a chance, it's bet on yourself. You can do this. There's resources and materials available for you to go out and just kind of fully own this and do it yourself.
Definitely. I think something that might be good to acknowledge here that might help kind of anyone who's in this position of hey, should I make this change or should I take this risk, is something I learned. I don't remember the formal name for it, but essentially it's the stages of change. So it's when you're going through a change, what happens to you emotionally? And kind of every change and every person has the same general stages. And it starts with the uninformed optimist. So you're this is going to be so easy. I'm going to go freelance. It's going to be amazing. Oh my God, I have this brilliant idea to start this agency. It's going to be the easiest thing. And then, so you're the uninformed optimist and you're at this real high. And then you enter the valley of despair or something, because you realize it's actually a lot harder. So now you're in this valley and you're oh my gosh, this is so hard. I don't know what's going to happen. And you're still learning. So you don't even have clarity on what's really going on. So this is the time when you're betting on yourself. It's not you're betting on yourself when things are going great. You're betting on yourself when you're really genuinely unsure if you're going to make it out the other side. And I've had moments with every company I've run, every project, it gets less profound, the valley, but this is the time when you're doing the most learning. So in the valley of despair, when it's hard to see the way out, when you're just in the trenches, you're actually getting so much knowledge, and it's hard to see because it doesn't feel great, but it's happening. And then you become an informed pessimist. So you're you know everything that goes on with running your business. And it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. It's not that 4-hour work week book that you read. And you're oh, right. Okay, this is a bit different than I thought. And then you go up from there and you become, I think it's just growth or something it. And things actually level out from there. But it's that time of the valley of despair when people usually quit because something else is shinier and they think they can avoid that curve if they just jump to something else. And I feel this every day of my life. I'm just going to switch to this other thing. But if you stay and stick with it through that and bet on yourself, you will come out the other side with much more learning, much more growth. And there's so many people who are afraid to go through that. So that's what thins out the competition for you.
Yeah, that's a really good framework to think through things. And like you said, I think that happens not in just career switch, but also just in every project where you're oh man, this is a lot more involved than what I originally thought. But you get your most learning in the valley of despair if you can push through.
Yeah, not the nicest name, but I promise it is worth it. And also you feel really good, right? Builds your confidence cycle and your resiliency. And now you have more knowledge. So let's say you start a project within a project or you have a new client. It is easier the next time. It's not that every single time you're going to go as deep. It does get easier every time. It's like that when you're learning a new sport. Like recently I learned how to kite surf. Oh my gosh, it is really tough. My husband and I flew to Brazil and we decided we wanted to learn to kite surf. We booked 3 weeks of kite surfing lessons almost every day and just went like full all in. And imagine now, so I've never kite surfed. I'm not very good at surfing. I don't do any real board sports. And now I have this thing that's like super strong in the wind, blowing me into the ocean. And the only thing I want to do is like grab it and pull it closer to me. But if you do that, you fly up, right? So like, it's like, I remember being there and just being like, I don't think this is going to get any better. And this is the sport I want to do. This is not even, this is something I paid to do, I'm paying for these high cortisol levels. And I stayed in the Valley of Despair for that as well for a while until I got to know the kite. And then I was like, okay, this is challenging, but it's worth it. And I'm still not great at kite surfing, but I can kite surf a little bit independently now. So
that's so funny. I love that. Yeah. So thinking about those who might be listening, I know we've kind of given a lot of advice already, but just kind of rounding out this idea of making a switch into a creative field or just having the confidence to be effective. Is there any piece of advice that you would give from your experience as you were kind of pursuing your design career?
Yeah, definitely. I think first is like get help, get support where you can. I'm like super pro support. Like I have coaches for everything, whether it's physical things or mental things. So get support. Listen to other people who are not yourself. So with this podcast or books, that really helps me get out of my own mind because it's so easy to get in a cycle of can't. Like I can't do this. I don't know how. And just really have your thoughts kind of carry you away. And so when I notice I'm getting a bit nervous because of my own thoughts, that's when I'm like, okay, I need to borrow someone else's mind. And that's the expression I use. Like I need to borrow their brain because I need to pop into there because mine's not serving me really well right now. So kind of getting that support and having people who believe in you around you is going to be awesome. I don't think it's the time for that mentor who's like super hard on you and stuff. I think you need that unconditional support that you can do it type of person who's going to be in your corner. And even if they don't have the credentials of like a top person in your industry, that support is worth the world. You could have the head of design or head of this at this big company who has very little time for you, and they're not going to help build that confidence cycle. So having someone who truly cares about you, cares about your well-being, and having that person in your corner is going to make the world of a difference.
I love that. What scenario do you think would be a good time to have the coach who is kind of like hard on you or gives you like a reality check?
I think it's really contingent on your personality. I personally don't love that at all, period. So maybe I'm just biased. So I want to just stay away from these people because I think that like, and it's, don't quote me on this, but I was listening to this book and they were like, just positive feedback works better than negative feedback in general, like positive reinforcement. Even if you are upset with someone's actions, just promote the positive one. I do that in my relationships. I do that with my employees. Like I try as hard as humanly possible to never scold, but just to encourage positive action. And if something has gone wrong, to take it upon myself and say, hey, I didn't give you what you needed. So that's a big principle that I have. And I think confidence is a better motivator than fear. So I don't think that anyone needs that reality check because no one really knows what reality is. Like everyone's like kind of figuring it out. And I think the people who are telling you that you can't are the people you often want to beat. I think that I remember when I first built Design Match and we had a model with no sales call. So all asynchronous sales. And I talked to a bunch of business mentors and they were like, you cannot sell something over, let's say $5,000 a month asynchronously. And I was like, watch me. And we did, I think our first like 200 something, 300,000, all asynchronous sales, which is incredible. And we now have calls. So I actually really like talking to people about this subject. So like I really missed it, but I think that the people who are telling you that you can't are the people who are possibly not leaving space for innovation.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really interesting topic because like in my experience working with contractors, working with employees, working with teammates, I think everyone has a different way that they can thrive on different types of feedback, right? And I think there are some people who, like you, need to feel supported to flourish. And once they feel safe and secure, they're going to be able to do really, really good work. And I also think there's people who kind of need a little like urgency of like, hey, like things aren't really going to expectation. Like we need to kind of have a level set. And like, personally, I don't like having those conversations because I am kind of like I like to go with the flow. I like to be a peacemaker. And in general, I completely agree that like positive reinforcement is much better than like fear. But yeah, no, it's just interesting to see like how different people respond to different things. Cause like I've had people where it's like, hey, we kind of have a tough conversation. And from then on, it's like, boom, awesome. We're on the same page. But yeah, also people are just like, hey, just no matter what way we cut it, it's not going to work out. Not a good fit, exactly. Whatever. Yeah. Different feedback for different people, I think is a good mantra for anyone who's managing people.
Definitely. And I think it's about the energy in which you go into it with, right? Like, it's just like, at the end of the day, how do you want this person to feel?
Yes.
How do you want them to feel bad because they did something bad? Do you want them to feel that they could, change? Like, it just depends how you want them to feel. I think that's a good framework to start with, in my opinion.
I don't know if it was a book or a mentor or a blog post I read, but it was something around the idea of if you want to address someone with something that kind of needs to be adjusted or fixed, make the fix seem like something that it is small or minimal to do, right? Like it's achievable, it's easy, it's just a few tweaks. It's not like this grand all-encompassing attack on your character. It's a small thing that you can actively change, and it's more about the task or the deliverable and not about your work ethic or your character or whatever character trait you want to insert.
Yeah, definitely. I think like I'm a big believer of like net positive. Like, even if you're having tough conversations, like just assume that you want the person to feel great, and attacking character is, I think, never great. Oh my gosh, and something that's so funny as a match where you see all different types of personalities. You get the best and the worst of people, of the designers and the emotions that come up with. And maybe this actually is a good segue to a point that I think is super duper important and not talked about enough, which is like emotional sustainability and resiliency. Like as a business owner, as a freelancer, you are a business owner. Even as an employee, you are, working with a lot of people and collaborating. And I don't think we pay enough attention to how we respond to situations and how we want to respond to situations. I think sometimes we think, oh, that's just how I react. That's just how I felt. That's it. It just happened. But there is choice here. And I think learning how to respond in a way that makes you proud of yourself is like one of the best things that I have ever done, because like it changes everything. Because now, like, I am not a product of my environment. I'm greater than my environment, and I choose how I want to be in my environment rather than my environment choosing how I am.
Yes. Wow. That's probably something we could have a whole podcast on itself. But yeah, no, it's like, even with my 5-year-old son, trying to instill in him that even when his sister steals something from him and it's completely unfair and mean, it's up to his choice how he responds, right? Yeah. He does not have to throw a fit. There's going to be people who are going to do mean things to you, and they're not owed your anger. Don't give them the ability to access your anger or whatever that emotion is. You can come to each situation, you can take a breath, you can understand, hey, what are the implications of how I respond? And it's clear that some people, even in their adult years, haven't learned that yet, but it's definitely necessary for interacting with humans.
100%. And something that helped me kind of as well. A lot of things have helped me through this, but I think a visual that's really positive for me is like thinking of like how our brain works and how our brain connects information. And so when we have like an event that's negative, like a traumatic event, or, we experience a negative emotion, we start correlating and making neural shortcuts to that that reaction, right? So it's like, I see a dog, I feel scared. Even if it's a cute little puppy, naturally, I'll just feel scared because every time I do it, I reinforce and tell my brain, oh, you don't even need to evaluate this. I just jump to the reaction. And then that gets imprinted over time. And then when we're adults, we feel sometimes a bit lost. Like, why can't I just react better to this? Why can't I just, like be calmer? And then we put all this pressure on ourselves because we don't really realize what's happening in our brains. And I know I felt that way. I feel anxious or nervous or upset with someone. And it's like, I don't want to feel this way, but I don't feel like I have a choice. But understanding kind of that actually it's a process of, like, if you think of an onion, like peeling back all of these layers of my brain saying, hey, just jump to this, and mindfulness and different practices can help. But what I'm trying to accomplish in that moment is a pause so I can choose. And getting that pause can be really challenging. But the more you understand what's happening in your brain, the easier it is to start, actually correcting those things the way you want them to be.
Yeah. It's like taking a moment and be like, this really upset me. And then asking the question, like, why did this really upset me? Or why did I want to respond in that way? And then, if you're, becoming self-aware about like what you're talking to yourself about or what you're evaluating, like, maybe that made me upset because of a completely unrelated issue that made me think this way. Or maybe it's an experience I had when someone says this or does this, it makes me very upset. Like, let's investigate that. Let's see, is that a me thing? Is that something I need to change? Is that something that really was upsetting in the instance and needs to be addressed? But just taking that moment to pause and understand and do a little introspection of where that might be coming from, I think is a amazing practice.
And it makes your business life so much smoother. Like, these things might feel like, okay, like, why are they going into like emotional development, those things? But I think about you're a freelancer, you're this independent person, or again, you're working in a company, collaborating with so many people. There's so much that's going to come at you.
Yeah.
I think that's the only guarantee is that, like, you're going to not know what you're doing a very large percentage of the time. And in order to feel okay with all of that uncertainty and all of those unknowns and the valley of despair and all the things that are coming that are also really exciting and really worth it. Having that emotional resiliency and awareness really just allows you to be present for those things and enjoy the ride so much more. So I always say, like, it is the best investment to invest in yourself, invest in learning about yourself so that you can be the person you dreamt of being and dream of being in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have times where you're like, man, I wish I was not here. I was not doing this thing. And it's like, let a bad day be a bad day. Don't let a bad day turn into a bad week or a bad month.
Exactly.
And just acknowledge it. Be like, yep, it was a bad day. Really didn't like it. Cool. Acknowledged. Let's move on. Every day is a new day. Let's pick it up and go from there.
Exactly. Awesome.
Cool. So, wanted to definitely obviously talk about your venture that we haven't quite talked about yet, which is Design Match, and everything that goes into that. So why don't you give us a little overview of what Design Match is?
Definitely. So Design Match is a company that I founded, and our mission is to empower 1 million designers as well as give startups access to better talent. So Design Match is a matchmaking company that matches amazing designers with ambitious startups for meaningful work. And it started out of a desire to create a better future of work. And it's kind of been my ethos since intern and creating all of these different companies to try and create a better work experience for both sides. For startups, a lot of times a designer is a person who's going to be able to translate the value of your company into the product. Right. So like if you have an interfaceless product, it's really hard to use. The interface is anything that the user is interacting to get to that end result. And so finding that designer who can translate those things can be really tough. What do you look for? They might have gone to boot camp or have these skills or really nice things on Dribble, but you don't know what that means for your company, your startup, your baby, which you're putting so much into. And so what we're doing is we're kind of that in between who understands startups, who understands designers, and understands that it's not just, especially for early stage startups, a technical fit, but a cultural fit. There's also some aspects of like personal values that come into it sometimes in a very early stage startup that really helps accelerate the growth and the production in terms of design when the match is there. So I could go on about it, but The essence is really that if we create better future work for the people who are designing the world around us, maybe they'll choose to design a better world, and maybe they'll choose projects that align with their values a bit more.
That's really cool. What gave you the idea to start Design Match?
Oh, well, there's so many ideas. It feels like the perfect culmination of all the things I've been working on for the last decade. So I started with intern and helping designers find internships at an earlier stage in their career, but didn't have the resources to really grow that. And then I had a few educational communities. So I had Design Club, which was an amazing community of designers where they got lessons every single week. We had guest speakers coming in to really teach people the business of design. I've had Freelance Travel Network, which again was all about teaching the business of being a creative and a freelancer, as well as Dream Team, which was matching startups to teams. And kind of like within all these companies that I was running and building and making things out of, I realized that access to opportunities was the last pillar in all of this. So I did a lot for creatives, but really didn't acknowledge at that point that not everyone's going to have those sales skills. Not everyone's going to be really good at communicating their value. And I had an agency at the time and was always overloaded at matching people from the agency for independent projects. And I had a team matching company as well, where we would match full teams and worked with some really large companies for that. And as I was overbooked and doing this matching, I realized, one, I love doing this. And I think I could create an algorithm around this. I think I could create an amazing experience around this and a wonderful brand. And yeah, and it just kind of, I made a web page for it, like a single landing page. There was no platform or anything like that. And within the first month of putting up that page, we got up to 36,000 in monthly recurring revenue of that single page. Yeah. And no advertisement, no notification, just people finding it from around the world. I was too scared to ask them how they found it because I was like, this must be a fluke.
So you just like kind of hit publish on WordPress, and then like, did you share it on social or send out emails or like anything like that? No. My theory is that like some of my LinkedIn, I have a pretty good LinkedIn. I don't like publish much on it, but I do have a lot of people in the network and I'm connecting with people consistently. But then sometimes I check back and like they weren't necessarily connects, but somehow through the grapevine of things, they found me. Sometimes it was as simple as I would write into a support ticket for a company. They would see my domain, look it up, and then inquire. So really quite a wide range of companies that were interested in working with Design Match at that time. It was pretty incredible. So was your pitch on your initial website kind of same what it is today of like, hey, if you need extra capacity with designers, I'll like help match you to precisely what you need?
Exactly. So we'll find the perfect designer for you. And that was it. And at the time, I didn't even have a network of designers. So we was like scrambling for our first few projects. But we found some amazing people. Like we did some furniture projects early on, some digital like web and app projects all across the world from Kuwait to the US. Like it was really incredible. And that's when I knew, okay, this is something worth investing in because all my other companies, I really struggled to get those initial sales, to get things moving. But Design Match, like it really moved itself into this day. Like we're just coming out of our beta year actually. And to this day, things have been happening and just coming because I've been like, I just want to build out our technology. Just give me a little bit of time. We're building, we're coming out of beta soon. People keep showing up, and it's been really incredible.
Wow. That's fantastic. What do you feel like the typical like persona of the person who comes to you is like, what are their problems and their needs that they're looking for?
Well, we have such a wide range of personas, but early stage startups, so usually they either come out of things like Y Combinator or different incubators, accelerators, and now they're trying to like achieve product market fit and really, but to do that, they need the value of their product to be very clear. And so they usually need a designer to help with the application, the website, the branding, the messaging. So they have different types of designers, but all in that earlier stage of like, we have something, but we need to improve it. We do have those just new ideas. I want to create this, especially to inventors. So we have inventors. Like, I want to create this thing. And so that is like another persona, which is really, really cool. I love that persona because it's like really stretches my brain as well, because I matched those ones specifically because it's very particular. But yeah, so we have quite a few different personas, but early stage startups is where we focus on.
Wow, amazing. So how do you find the designers to get to say who wants to work on stuff?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of designers in our network now at this point. We have a whole platform like that does everything. So we post a job, people like just say they're interested. We don't make people do like a full application or anything like that. You have a profile on Design Match, which you could actually use outside of Design Match, which is really cool. We have some designers using it to pitch for jobs outside. And we are also, this is a little segue, but we're also launching a leads tool. So our mission is empowerment. So even if we don't have a job for you, we're actually going to have a free leads list where you can go and apply to jobs outside of our network. So, and you can use your profile to do that. And so just really trying to make the whole life cycle of a designer a little bit better. But yeah, people applied. We had a lot of designers apply to get into Design Match. We have a pretty big wait list now because we just are going through everything. But people have been coming to us. We will start a campaign soon to attract more designers for more specific skill sets. But we've had great people coming to us. And the first initial designers who came, I want to say it felt like kind of like a kismet situation, because I would have an inquiry. I'd be like, I don't know where I'm going to find this designer. And poof, they appeared somehow. Like maybe a friend told me about this wonderful person, and then I vetted them, brought them into the network, or they were in the network and I just never saw them and they just, popped up there. But yeah, I've just been able to find many great designers.
How do you evaluate good design talent? And what kind of is your criteria for if you say like, I feel like I could trust this person, or they'd be a good person to put on a project or present to a client?
Definitely. Well, we have a vetting process, which involves, going through their portfolio, interviews, all of that fun stuff, and looking at kind of how they think through design. But since we're working with early stage startups, the most important qualities are communication and leadership. So these companies, you are the design team in most of them. There might be other designers working on other aspects of the product, but you are going to be leading design for whatever you're working on. So even we matched a designer at a large company called SingSaver. So they had design talent and things, but that designer who we brought on, we brought 3 designers, but one of them, he's working in travel insurance or something like that. And so, but he owned that department. And so that leadership skill set is super duper important, and how you communicate your work is super important. So evaluating good design, it's less of like what's good and what's bad, but it's how mindful you are of the decisions you're making, how much you can create original work. So there's a lot of UI kits and a lot of kind of like the same. So it's seeing how your take on something based on the industry, the target market and persona, and your understanding and ability to translate that. So kind of looking for that extra level of depth in your thinking. And that's a big sign that, okay, we can maybe trust you with something via Design Match.
Wow. And then I'm sure so it's like kind of figuring out what the client needs, figuring out the designer, if they would be appropriate to come onto your platform. And then there's kind of like that third tier of like matching, right? So like, tell me a little bit your process for how to effectively match the right person with the right company.
Yeah. So I think, first we have an algorithm that does help support us from the basis, from a skill perspective, just narrow down the hard skill. And we're hopefully, with a bit more data, going to be able to evaluate some soft skills as well, based on interviews and stuff like that. We're trying to work on machine learning to help us and support us. But Design Matches, the whole purpose of like how we're building Design Matches, we don't want to rely on more human capital to scale. And so what that means is we want to use technology as much as we can, so that when we're working with the founders and the designers, we can spend extra time with them rather than being so much in the support side. We can be really on the front lines with our creatives and with the founders. And so the matching, there's a lot of different factors that go into it. First, the stage of the company. So again, the earlier stage, the more leadership. So it's kind of like if you're very early stage, we need more of that idea thinker, that a bit more of a generalist who can do the UX, UI, like if we're on the digital product design side. And then we have the cultural fit and values. So we have a lot of mission-driven founders who are coming out to work with Design Match. And so making sure that person believes in whatever the founder is doing is super important, and just that general kind of like, hey, I at least think this is relatively important in the world. It doesn't have to be your sole mission in life, but just that you have to share the same belief system because you're translating that belief system into design. And I don't believe you can do that if it's against your value system.
Right.
And then there is the style, look and feel. So kind of more traditional, more out there, more graphically driven. And kind of that's really the founder's personality and their vision for their company. So there's more factors than that, of course.
Sure.
Those are kind of the base ones, I think, that we would go into for every matching arrangement.
Wow. So how long does it take for you to, match someone with a company? If a company, comes to you on a Monday and they're like, we need a designer ASAP, like what's kind of the process there?
Yeah, between Wednesday and Friday. So 3 to 5 days is the turnover time for matching.
Wow.
And usually you're able to make a hire within if you don't count the weekend, 8 days, because you might have an interview with the designer, see how it goes, make sure it's a good fit. But our interview to success rate is in the 90s. Our matching score is ridiculously high. So once we get to that point where they've actually met the match, it's very, very, very rare that it doesn't go through.
Wow. That is fantastic. So you've kind of spoken about what your future vision for Design Match is. And, empowering, I think you said 1 million freelancers. How far off do you think that vision is for you?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's kind of more about the journey to get there. It's the way the company has to be in order to even become close to accomplishing that. And so that is more important than actually when we get there, because what we're doing along the way, we want to run Design Camp, which is a multidisciplinary summer camp style design creativity gathering for designers. We want to have Design Fund to actually be able to fund different projects creatives are working on. And so all of these things will just exponentially grow our impact, and it will ripple as well. And so what I am saying, who do we have to be as a company to be the company who can empower those 1 million designers? And that is what pushes me rather than setting a specific target date.
Very cool. Now, are you planning to do this in a bootstrapped fashion? Or are you looking to eventually go out and raise funds for this?
Yeah, I continuously on the fence. Design Match is profitable as a company, which is really great. And it's been, back and forth. I don't know if we'll need to raise. That's the thing. But I know our impact can be exponentially larger if we do raise. So this is one of the things that I'm waiting on, just continuing on our path, growing, doing what we need to do. And then once, we get to a certain point, then I will revisit that. So it's kind of like a Q3 question.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. Well, Danielle, this has been a fantastic talk about everything from design to emotional intelligence to entrepreneurship. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise with us, and I'll let you have the final word.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for everything. This has been amazing. And I really hope if a designer is listening to this, that they're feeling motivated and inspired to continue their work and that they know that their work is meaningful. Whether you're junior, an intern, or senior in a company, the work that you're doing impacts people's daily lives. And it's such a privilege to be able to be in this position. So just know that you are important. The work that you're doing is important. And I hope to see you on Design Match as well. You can apply on Design Match. I would love to see you in the network.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today on the Product Design Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure and go follow our guests. Let them know they did a great job and you learned a lot. More to come in the following weeks as we bring on new guests. Please hit that subscribe button so that you will get these podcasts and learn a ton about the product design community. Excited to see you next time. Thanks.